As security concerns increase in the eastern Mediterranean over the war in Iran, Turkey has sent F-16 fighter jets and air defence systems to the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Our diplomatic correspondent Andrew Hopkins reports.
Sent by the Turkish Defence Ministry, these fighter jets are landing on an island just 400 kilometres away from Israel. Greek Cypriot moves towards closer relations with Tel Aviv have increased concerns among Turkish and Turkish Cypriot leaders that the island could get dragged into the conflict.
The Greek Cypriot administration is acting as if it is the sole owner of the entire island, taking decisions that exceeds its authority by disregarding the will and sovereign equality of the Turkish Cypriot people, and seeking a role for itself within great power rivalries, particularly through its recent military engagements and base policies, has increased security risks for the island.
A British airbase on the island has already been targeted by Iranian drones, resulting in a pledge of more aircraft and a warship from the UK government. Greece has also sent 2 warships, fighter jets and a drone detection system to help the Greek Cypriots who say they're not involved in the conflict. France is also sending military hardware. Greece cites its duties as a security guarantor under the island's international treaties. Now the Turkish government is doing the same, concerned that extra protection is needed for Turkish Cypriots if the war spreads.
At this point, the importance of the role carried by the Republic of Turkey for the security of the Turkish Cypriot people once again clearly emerges. Turkey's guarantorship and its presence on the island are of vital importance for the security of the Turkish Cypriot people and for maintaining the balance in the eastern Mediterranean.
The increased military tension comes as another attempt is being made, with the new Turkish Cypriot president, to find a solution on the island, which has been divided for several decades.
Andrew joins us live now from the Turkish capital. Andrew, I will ask you about the effects this is having on the divided island of Cyprus. But first of all, I just wanted to get an update, if we have one, about the closed-door session that Hakan Fidan, the Foreign Minister, and the Defence Minister, Yaşar Güler, have been holding, briefing Parliament about the latest.
We don't have anything of yet. Of course, it was a closed session to the media. So although the media were allowed in, some of them to listen to what they had to say to Parliament, we're not allowed to actually report it openly at this stage, although there will be some information, I think, revealed during that meeting, which may be important in the coming days and weeks, which may shed some light on what the Turkish government is doing and how this situation is going to develop. So no information at the moment that we can report on, but clearly the Turkish Foreign Minister, the Turkish Defence Minister will have been talking about these 2 missiles which have been fired in the direction of Turkey in the last few days. The Turkish government clearly of the opinion that these were fired from Iran, and there have been phone calls in the last 24 hours or so between the Iranian and Turkish president and the Turkish foreign minister and the Iranian foreign minister about this very subject. The Turkish government saying that this is an unacceptable situation, that missiles are being fired into Turkish airspace when Turkey is not involved in this conflict at all in any particular shape or form. The Iranian government, the Iranian military, it seems, are trying to target the presence of some US military within Turkey at the moment. But the Turkish president, in a speech this week, showing his he's losing patience with Iran after these 2 missiles have been shot down, because he's basically suggesting that the Turkish government might do something if this situation continues. Officials are not saying exactly what, but it seems like they're sort of reaching the end of their tether at the moment with Iran in this particular situation.
If Cypriot security is under threat, what does that mean for the division on the island? Will it help at least the political dialogue between the 2 Cypriot communities, because they're facing a collective threat after all?
Well, not so far, unfortunately. This issue has been around for quite a few months, and I would say since before the US and Israel attacks on Iran from June last year. Turkish Cypriot politicians of different political persuasions were all saying a similar thing, which was they were worried that the Greek Cypriots were becoming increasingly friendly with Israel, and as a result there could be at any point missiles coming from Iran if there's an outbreak of a conflict, and that has happened. And the worry for them particularly was these missiles are often not all that accurate, so they could quite easily fall on the Turkish Cypriot side of the border, not the Greek Cypriot. And if that happens, who's going to help them then? They're not expecting necessarily the Greek Cypriots to do that or anybody else because of the division on the island, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. The Turkish government is sending these F-16s in the fighter jets, 6 of them, to help the Turkish Cypriots in the eventuality of some more problems arising in the near future. And what we're also seeing at the moment is this buildup of hardware in the Eastern Mediterranean. The French have sent the aircraft carrier and other bits of military equipment to help the Greek Cypriots. Greece has also sent 2 frigates, 2 medium-sized warships and some aircraft and some other systems. They're saying they're doing it because they are security guarantors on the island of Cyprus due to the various international treaties which set up the modern state of Cyprus in 1960. Now, the Turkish government is doing exactly the same thing, it says, to help the Turkish Cypriots on their side of the divide on the island. And what this effectively has meant is this increase in military hardware is increasing tension to a certain extent. Some people on the island would react to this as a sort of a provocation in some respects, because will this hardware be still there when the conflict is over? Are either side, maybe the Greek Cypriots or the Turkish Cypriots, increasing their capabilities on the island for the long term? And the idea for a solution on the island is to reduce the military threats, the amount of hardware, and try and reach some kind of understanding. And while that is happening, it's difficult to see how the new attempts to get a solution on the island off the ground will take place, because as I've said, we've just had this a new Turkish Cypriot president elected just over 4 months ago, and there are meetings taking place, but this is another added complication to that process.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much indeed. That's our diplomatic correspondent, Andrew Hopkins in Ankara. Here in the studio is Zuhal Merdozener, Professor of International Relations at Marmara University. Thank you so much for coming in, Professor. This isn't just about Greek-administered Cyprus or the TRNC. This is about Türkiye as well. Over the past few days, these 2 projectiles being shot down by NATO air defense systems. How delicate a moment is this for Türkiye? How much threat is it really realistically in?
Actually, Turkey is not a part of the war, as it's explained very clearly, and Turkey does not want to be a part of this war because, as you know, Turkish foreign policy focuses on very important principle. The order and stability in the region is the priority of Turkish foreign policy. From that point of view, use of force, and in this case, you know, there is no international recognition. So it's out of United Nations Security Council resolution framework, so there is no legitimacy actually. And the classical Turkish foreign policy perspective have been always against such kind of interventionism. Not only in this case, it is a kind of tradition in Turkish foreign policy. So from that point of view, what happened in the last days were considered a kind of, let's say, the sad events, and not actually Turkish, let's say, the officials are not waiting some, let's say, continuation of this kind of events, and they want to consider all these happenings as a kind of accidental developments and not to increase the tension and trying to find a way for dialogue and solution. So this is the perspective for now.
That's the ideal scenario, that diplomacy and discussions will lead to a resolution. But NATO has just sent a Patriot air defense system and its missiles to the east of Turkey because of those projectiles coming from Iran. In terms of Article 5, do you see that as being something that will concentrate Iran's mind? If Iran were to seek some kind of, if it attacks Turkey, and therefore there is some kind of response, does a Turkish response become a NATO response? Are the two, can they be separated?
I think it can be separated. That's why Turkish officials shall be very careful about this kind of steps. As you can see, we are living in a very volatile world order right now. So what to expect in the next step is very blurred. So how to find a clear answer to this question is very, very difficult. That's why I didn't say automatically, yes, Article 5 is protecting. No, this is not working like this for many cases. And Turkey's experience about this issue, because of several security threats in our history and near history, we couldn't find any support about this protection. But for now, there is a huge amount of, let's say, the navies and the artilleries in the Eastern Mediterranean somehow considered as part of this NATO forces. So when we look at their explanations, it's clear that they are presenting a kind of readiness to respond to any kind of Iranian attack to Turkey. But here there's a very big question. Is it war of Turkey? And shall we be a part of Turkey? Shall be a part of, let's say, the war as Turkey? So this is a very important question, and I think Turkish officials want to decrease tension and not to create a continuous instability in the region. So I think we are not at that point about Article 5. So I think Turkish officials for now thinking that there is a way to deal with Iranian officials, not to attack Turkey. And I think Iranians are enough rational people to think that it's not necessary for now. Because Turkey is very sensitive about Iranian sensitivities. This is also very important. It's not just escaping from Article 5.
They get along quite well.
Yes, and this is not the only case. I'm trying to explain this perspective very, very clearly. In case of Ukraine, in case of other regional conflicts, Turkey tries to settle down this rising tension to create a platform of diplomatic conducts. And we are not also very naive. I need to underline that too, because sometimes it seems like Turkey is somehow dreaming some good, nice days for future. No, it's not the case. Turkish diplomacy has capacity to see which platforms and has what capacity, so where there is need to make investment and where is not. So that's why we need to see that this Article 5 issue is not the case for stopping Iran to attack Turkey. Turkey's capacity, Turkey's regional policy, neighborhood policy by itself is a kind of deterring capacity, and it is diplomatic, it is not military. And I think this is more important than what we are talking about NATO today.
Sure, okay. We shouldn't take knowledge for granted. Article 5, by the way, is that collective defensive agreement NATO has. If one member is attacked, the others can, at that request, come to the aid of the country that's been attacked.
Sure.
Professor, stay with us. We're going to continue this and look at some different angles here. 1 year on, a key agreement between Damascus and the SDF, which is run by the YPG terror group in neighbouring Syria, is facing serious tests. The March the 10th deal was meant to bring SDF forces under state control after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Instead, delays and rising tensions are raising doubts about whether it can still deliver stability, with the fallout now being felt beyond Syria's borders. Our correspondent Aslat Bash reports.
In late 2024, following Assad's fall, Syria entered a fragile new chapter. While Damascus claimed authority, nearly a quarter of the country remained under YPG-SDF terror group control. Months of stalled negotiations and mounting pressure led the terror group YPG to sign a formal settlement on March 10th last year. The US brokered deal sought to dissolve the terror group, integrate its members into state security forces, and grant Kurdish communities broader rights. Regional leaders warned that the fate of the agreement would determine whether northern Syria finds stability or chaos.
I believe that, first with God's help, and then with the Syrian government's prudent, resolute, inclusive and just policies, there will be no return to the bad old days. In particular, the implementation of the March 10th agreement by those who signed it, in accordance with the principle of fidelity to agreements, will resolve an important issue. The smooth implementation of the agreement will upset the plans of the evil forces that have invested in an unstable, divided and weak Syria.
The agreement set deadlines, but none were met. Months of negotiations produced little progress. By early 2026, tensions in Aleppo reached a breaking point. A drone attack on government police vehicles on January 5th sparked heavy clashes that spread into terror group-controlled Sheikh Maksud and Ashrafia districts. Syrian special forces launched a rapid operation, capturing both districts within days and forcing hundreds of YPG terrorists to withdraw. By the end of the operation, government forces had fully secured the city, restoring state control and ending immediate fighting. Turkey has repeatedly warned its Western allies, especially the US, that supporting the terror group YPG-SDF, the Syrian branch of PKK, would risk stability and territorial integrity of Syria. But the threat isn't confined to Syria alone. Across the region, PKK-affiliated groups remain active, including recently in Iran and in northern Iraq as well, raising concerns for multiple governments about regional security. Amid the ongoing US-Israel war in Iran, Ankara warns these groups could ignite wider regional tensions, complicating the war and endangering civilians.
We are opposed to all scenarios that aim to instigate a civil war in Iran, targeting conflict along ethnic or religious fault lines. This is the most dangerous scenario. We are openly warning everyone, both the West and the East, against this scenario. This will not only lead to more suffering and loss of life for innocent civilians in Iran, but it could also cause millions to be displaced and forced to become refugees in neighboring countries and beyond.
Although there are reports in the US media that Washington is looking for ways to work with PKK-affiliated group in Iran, namely payjack, US President Trump rejects allegations.
We're not looking to the Kurds going in. We're very friendly with the Kurds, as you know, but we don't want to make the war any more complex than it already is.
After Turkey's proactive diplomacy with all its partners, terror group PKK's offshoot in Syria seems eliminated. But US-Israel war in Iran raised concerns whether another terror-affiliated group will be another element in regional tensions. Aslat Baştiyati, Welt, Ankara.
In northern Iraq, there have been strikes on an Iran-backed group there. At least 4 people have been killed, 12 injured. Our correspondent Yunus Demirolu is in Erbil in Iraq. Yunus, what do these strikes on this Iran-backed group tell us about the dynamic between those Iranian-backed militias and indeed the Iraqi branch of the PKK terror group and their relationship with Iran and what it might mean for the war?
Well, that is a very complex question, I have to say, just mainly because the situation in Iraq is also very complex, I'd have to say, Adnan. I mean, we're talking about daily clashes and daily airstrikes coming in from within Iraq, from those militias that we just stated. We're talking about, at the same time, American airstrikes and operations that are being carried out against these Iranian-aligned militias. So, as to its relation with the PKK affiliates, I have to say that both in Iran and in Iraq right now, that we haven't heard much from them. From JPAC, from the Iranian side, they have been maintaining sort of a low profile at the moment. They are not really conducting much of the chaos that is ensuing within Iran as well as in Iraq as well. So I think the main topic of concern for the Kurds here is first and foremost, the territorial integrity and the pillar that Turkey has been so far. I had the chance to go through Diyarbakir before I came here, and it was heartwarming to see the sense of solidarity among the Kurds there. I think despite them having a different sort of identity, the nationality remains the same. Despite the turbulent past that the Kurds and the Turks have faced over since the formation of the Republic of Turkey, I think right now we're at a point where everyone is showing their own solidarity and their understanding that Turkey is one of those pillars of peace and constructivity in the Middle East. And if indeed Turkey ensues or faces some sort of chaos, that it will affect the whole region altogether. And that really reflects itself in the Kurdish-controlled regions in northern Iraq as well. There have been several phone calls between Nechirvan Barzani, the president of the Kurdish-controlled regions in the north, as well as President Erdoğan. They're expressing their fears of maintaining the control along the borders as well. So there's a close partnership between these two sides, and I think that does also reflect itself upon the question that you asked right now. But we really haven't heard much from those terrorist organizations within this past almost 2 weeks, Adnan.
How difficult is the government in Baghdad finding it to control these groups?
extremely difficult, I'd have to say. I think it's really interesting to watch this unfold within Iraq as well, because Iraq faced its own sort of long and atrocious war with the United States, as we know. So many Iraqis really do not look on the United States fondly, and that really reflects itself in the Iraqi parliament as well. We've been seeing chants of anti-American slogans in the Iraqi parliament. But at the same time, you have an Iraqi government that one has to work with the Iranian government because, simply put, they're just neighbors. And at the same time, it's kind of in bed with the United States as well, as the United States has several military assets and is invested greatly in terms of its military bases, both in the Baghdadi side of the government as well as the northern side in Erbil. So it's a really precarious situation because at the same time, those Iranian-aligned militias that we mentioned are trying to ensure some sort of chaos. Most of the attacks that have come to Erbil, to the northern parts of Iraq, as well as all throughout the country, have not come from Iran. They have come from within the country. And just to give you a scale, an idea of how big those Iranian-aligned militias are, we're talking about tens of thousands of soldiers that have been institutionalized, that are paid by the government. The 2024 budget for the Popular Mobilization Forces was about 3.4 billion, and that number is only expected to get bigger. So it's a delicate balancing act, if I have to say, but I don't really see how exactly it's being balanced. The only answer that I have for this country not descending into an utmost chaos is, one, the Iranians are playing their cards slowly. They understand that this could be a long war. At the same time, if they overstep their boundaries, if they bite off more than they can chew, then the resulting answer can be much harsher from the United States as well as from the Israelis. But the other answer that I can think of, Adnan, is simply that the toll that would be exacted by utmost chaos would just be too high to bear.
Yunus Demirolu in Erbil in Iraq. Thanks, Yunus. Here in the studio, Zuhal Mert Uzner, Professor of International Relations at Marmara University. Professor, the KRG's president has said that they don't want to get involved at all in this war. And yet the Western media that's not allowed into Iran has been trying to get as close to the country as possible. Many are in Iraq. They have been speaking to members of the PKK branch in Iraq. And many of those fighters have said, we're ready, we just need the Americans to provide us air cover. This is a seriously dangerous moment.
Sure, because Turkey was always underlining the importance of this territorial integrity and the problems with the proxy elements in a country. And the PKK is a very problematic organization for now in Iraq. It is obvious because Iraqi officials are saying we don't want to be engaged in this war, and there is also another front, probable front, which can be opened with the permission of United States without the recognition of central government. So what kind of state apparatus we are talking about? It's very clear, and it's talking about, we need to talk about this, let's say, the creation of an entity as they were trying in Syria. This is the target, it's very clear. But from another perspective, it's very naive again and again. You know, the Americans are leaving their proxy allies in the region. We observed what happened in Afghanistan, and then in Syria we observed, and this is the third time. And I think there is need to learn from the history what to do and how to behave, and it's time to think to remember the realities in field, because at the end the Kurdish population in Iraq are living there and they have a life, and it is not a gamble, let's say, the bargain chip in the hands of some proxy actors. From that perspective, I think this is again very dangerous situation for civilians, especially in the northern part of Iraq. And I hope there is no such kind of adventurism in the field, because it will be again very, very dangerous for regional countries, because civilians will try to escape, because there will be again bombings, and it will create again civilian casualties, and their name will be again collateral damage. So this collateral damage is always targeting Middle Eastern people. So that's not fair. That's not just. Let's try to keep it in mind.
Okay, we'll continue after we hear from the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, because he has warned Tehran to stay away from provocative actions. This is after that second missile was fired from Iran and was shot down by NATO air defense systems once it entered Turkish airspace.
NATO tarafından
On March 4, a missile launched from Iran was neutralized by NATO. Subsequently, the necessary warnings were issued to the Iranian authorities. Despite our sincere warnings, extremely wrong and provocative steps that would strain Turkey's friendship continue to be taken. One should not enter into calculations that would cast a shadow over our 1,000-year-old brotherhood. Turkey's position and stance are clear. Our extraordinary efforts to prevent the fire from spreading further and to stop more bloodshed are evident. In the context of today's incident, I would like to remind once again that there should be no persistence and stubbornness in wrongdoing.
Professor Uzner, is the president there not just addressing the Iranian government, but also its proxies, like this Iran-backed group that's been hit in northern Iraq? Because it was my understanding that the PKK was laying down its weapons. Does that mean in Iraq the terror group hasn't done so? And does that mean there's not some kind of centralized command structure in that PKK group?
At the beginning of that process, everybody was talking about very centralized structure of PKK and this kind of organizations. You know, they are very hierarchical, very leader-oriented decision-making mechanism they had. This was a discussion, but later we started to see that this proxy nature of this organization started to be somehow, let's say, that emerge in these happenings. For example, some branches inside PKK started to support, let's say, started to be supported by Israel, and we can see some other actors try to utilize their effectivity. So these are not correct and right things for what we are trying to do with PKK, actually. But how much it is under control, it's a very big question right now, especially in this case of Iraq. So it is obvious that all institutions, all organizations have also a kind of reaction to their disappearance. This is also important because at the end it creates a kind of reason for existence, the group somehow acting in the region. So elimination of PKK by itself is a problem, and maybe it can be understood from that angle too.
Professor, really appreciate you coming in, because it's quite clear that the more actors are involved, whether they're governments or even more so if they're non-state actors, this thing becomes more and more difficult to find a way out of. And if it continues, then we're going to need your expertise more often. Thanks a lot for taking time to come into the studio.